My name is Julia Elridge, and I always thought I was the family's rock. Until the morning I handed my brother the deed to the house he tried to steal, and watched his pregnant wife Maya's jaw drop as movers stripped the bed she'd claimed as hers. I said nothing, just took my tea and walked past them while they screamed in disbelief. But before that victory, there was this moment, the one where they tried to push me out of my own room like I was just a guest in my own life. Before we get into it, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Ever had your own family turn on you the moment you stopped being useful? You're not alone. Here's how it all started. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the kitchen felt warm from the morning light, the clink of a spoon against my favorite mug still echoing in the quiet. I was halfway through my coffee, the first peaceful moment of the week, when Greg walked in. My older brother, Greg Elridge, smug in a way only the oldest son of Southern parents can be, looked like he'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. "Hey Jules," he started casually, like he wasn't about to upend my world. "Maya's pregnant." I blinked. "She is," he nodded, and then came the sucker punch. "Yeah, and we'll need your room. Mom and Dad say it's time you grow up anyway." I set my mug down slower than I wanted to, feeling the burn of heat crawl up my throat. "Excuse me. Been living in that room for what, years now?" he said, like I hadn't grown up here, like I hadn't stayed after college to help our dad with his heart recovery or paid the utilities when the rest of them were drowning in denial. "It makes the most sense. We need the space. Maya can't be climbing stairs all pregnant and tired." I turned toward our mother, who just stepped into the kitchen carrying a basket of laundry. "Mom, please tell me you didn't agree to this." She didn't meet my eyes. "Julia, sweetie, you're 26. Greg and Maya are starting a family. It's time you learn to compromise." "Compromise?" I repeated. "You want me to give up my room for them?" "It's not your room, it's the family home," Dad called from the hallway, not even bothering to walk in. "It belongs to all of us." I almost laughed. So the years I stayed, helped with Dad's surgery, took care of the mortgage while Greg backpacked around Europe and Maya job hopped, none of that counts. Greg folded his arms, posture stiff. "Come on, Jules, don't be dramatic, it's just a room." My fists clenched at my sides. "Then why don't you take the basement?" "Because it's moldy and cold and Maya's pregnant," he snapped. "We're not asking you to leave, just adjust." I looked at all three of them and something cracked inside. Not loudly, not like glass shattering, but soft and slow, like fabric tearing at the seam. "I see," I said, voice trembling. "And you all agreed on this, without me." No one answered. Maya, ever the quiet observer, stood behind Greg like a shadow, resting a hand over her still flat belly as if the imagined weight of motherhood gave her authority. "You want to know what's selfish?" I said, stepping back. "It's asking someone to erase herself so you can feel more comfortable." "Julia," Mom warned, "don't start." "Oh, I already started," I said quietly. The air had gone thick, the kind you could slice with a butter knife. My pulse thundered in my ears, and suddenly the kitchen felt too small, too hot, too full of people who didn't see me unless they needed something. "I need air," I said, brushing past them, shoulders rigid. "And don't touch a single thing in my room." "Julia," Dad called again. "You're being unreasonable." I paused at the door. "Maybe, but at least I'm not being spineless." And with that, I walked out into the cold morning light, teeth clenched and heart pounding, not broken, just bracing. That night I retreated to my room like a soldier returning from battle, wounded pride hidden behind silence. The day had left me drained, every nerve frayed. I'd skipped dinner, choosing instead to lie in bed with my cat Marley, pressed against my side like a heartbeat I could still trust. My door was closed, locked even, or so I thought. A quiet knock, then the creak of it opening without permission. I sat up. Maya stood there, arms folded awkwardly around something blue. "Hey," she said in that careful, almost apologetic voice she always used when she was about to deliver bad news. I did laundry earlier, thought I'd help out." She stepped into my room, uninvited, holding up a damp pair of jeans, my jeans. Dark wash, high-rise designer, ones I'd bought last year with a freelance bonus I was proud of. "I didn't know they needed to be washed separately," she said, attempting a sheepish smile. "They were in the basket with towels, so I just threw them all in." My stomach sank as I took them from her. They were stretched and roughened, the once rich texture dulled. "These were dry clean only." "Oh," Maya said, blinking. "Oops, sorry, I thought I was helping." Helping, she walked into my room, touched my things, ruined something that was clearly expensive and called it helping. I swallowed hard. "Maya, next time please just ask." She tilted her head, confusion barely masked. I was trying to lighten your load. You seemed tense earlier. Tense. Because your husband just tried to evict me from my own room. I don't need help with my laundry, I said, voice tighter than I intended. Maya gave a little laugh like I was the one making this awkward. All right, she said, waving a hand as if dismissing my feelings. No good deed, huh? Her tone grated. A subtle mix of condescension and practiced innocence. I placed the jeans carefully on my chair, ignoring the sick twist in my gut. Just, don't touch my clothes again. Maya smiled faintly. Of course, I'll be more careful. She turned to leave but paused at the doorway. By the way, Greg and I were thinking maybe we could repaint in here, make it brighter for the baby. I stared at her. Excuse me, she blinked as if I were the one being irrational. You know, if you're moving to the basement or wherever, it's just that this room gets the most light. I didn't answer. She gave a little shrug as if the conversation hadn't just made my blood run cold. Anyway, sleep well. And then she left just like that, leaving the door wide open behind her. I sat there for a full minute unmoving. Marley meowed softly at my feet, rubbing his head against my ankle. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a slow-moving takeover, dressed up in sweet smiles and oops apologies. And my family was letting it happen. As I closed the door and locked it, really locked it this time, I ran my fingers over the ruined fabric of my jeans. It wasn't about denim. It was about the quiet way people erase you while pretending they're doing you a favor. And the scary part, they count on you being too polite to call it what it is. The next morning, I woke early, earlier than usual, honestly, because I hadn't really slept. I made my way downstairs, dragging my fingers along the banister like it might tether me to something calm. The house was quiet except for the hum of the coffee machine and faint sounds from the dining room. That was where I saw her. Maya. At the head of the table. Her legs were curled into the chair like she owned it, sipping coffee out of my favorite chipped mug. My laptop sat open in front of her, the familiar screen glowing until it didn't. A sudden fizzing sound broke through the silence, followed by a soft pop and the unmistakable scent of burning plastic. No, I rushed over. Too late. The screen flickered violently, then turned black. A faint trail of smoke rose from the keyboard as Maya jumped back, eyes wide. Her coffee cup tipped slightly on the table, brown liquid pooling around the base of the computer. Oh my God, I whispered, heart sinking. What did you do? I didn't mean to, Maya stammered, setting the mug aside now like that would fix anything. I was just checking something and I guess the mug was too close. Too close, I said, voice rising despite myself. That laptop has 5 years of design work on it. My entire freelance portfolio. Contracts. Tax forms. I didn't even back up half of it yet. Maya stood slowly, hands raised like I was a bomb about to detonate. It's just a computer, Julia. The words sliced through the air like ice. No, I snapped louder now. It's not just a computer, it's my work, my life. You had no right to even touch it. She blinked, that familiar look of doe-eyed innocence creeping in. You always leave it downstairs. I figured it was fine. No, you figured you'd be fine. That there'd be no consequences for you. Okay, calm down, Greg's voice called from the hallway, and then he appeared, still pulling a hoodie over his head. What's going on? She spilled coffee on my laptop, I said, gesturing to the damage as smoke continued to rise faintly. It's ruined. Greg's gaze shifted to Maya. Are you okay? She nodded, biting her lip like she'd just survived a traumatic experience. Then he looked at me. All right, look, accidents happen. You don't have to scream at her over a machine. My jaw dropped. Are you serious? That machine is how I pay my bills. Mom came in next, already frowning. What's all the noise about? Julia's laptop shorted out, Greg explained calmly. Maya accidentally spilled coffee. It wasn't on purpose, Maya added quickly. I don't care if it was on purpose, I cut in. She shouldn't have touched it at all. Mom looked between us, already tired of the drama. Julia, honey, your things are always in the shared spaces. If it's that important, maybe don't leave it lying around. That was the moment I realized. They weren't going to see it. They wouldn't let themselves see it. Maya stood in the wreckage of something I built from scratch, and I was the one being scolded. I left it on the table for 30 minutes while I was in the shower, I said slowly. 30 minutes, and now it's gone. It's just a laptop, Greg muttered again, under his breath. And I couldn't help it, I laughed. One short, bitter bark of a laugh that startled even me. Right, I said. It's just a room, just a pair of jeans, just a computer. It's always just something when it's mine. No one said anything. The silence was worse than yelling. Marley patted in and curled against my ankle like he knew I needed anything grounding. I reached down to stroke his back, my fingers trembling. "I'll be sending you the repair bill," I said, staring at Maya. Her eyes widened again. "I didn't. No, of course you didn't mean to," I cut her off. "But you did, and you don't get to keep treating my life like it's disposable just because you're carrying a baby." "Julia," Mom warned, but I was already turning away. I couldn't stay in that room another second. I carried the lifeless laptop upstairs in my arms like a body, sat it gently on my desk, though the gesture was pointless now, and I stood there, staring at it, tears pricking the back of my eyes, not because of the computer. Because of what it proved again. I didn't matter to them unless I was giving, unless I was quiet, unless I was useful, and I was none of those things right now, not anymore. I went out for a walk that afternoon with no destination in mind, just a need to escape the thick, stifling air of our house. The November chill cut through my sweater, but it felt good. Cleansing, honest. I wandered past brick bungalows and quiet yards strewn with early autumn leaves, Marley's little face still in my mind, peeking out from under my desk as I'd whispered, "I'll be back soon, buddy." When I returned an hour later, something felt off. The front door was unlocked, open just a crack. The living room was quieter than it should have been, especially with Greg home. And then I saw it, my bookshelf, my coat stand, the lamp from my nightstand, all stacked haphazardly against the basement door like leftover yard sale items waiting to be claimed. I stared for a full 10 seconds before realizing what I was looking at. My things. I dropped my keys, heart pounding, and stormed downstairs. Boxes, my clothes, my books. My art supplies, the ones I kept in color-coded bins, now tossed in open cardboard. Even my framed college diploma was leaning against a dusty wall next to the water heater. And there, right above me, on what used to be my bed, sat Greg, scrolling on his phone like he'd always belonged there. He didn't even flinch when I appeared. "Hey," he said, "took you long enough." I stared at him. What is this?" Greg sat up, casually brushing lint off the duvet. "We needed to get the nursery started. Figured we'd help move your stuff to the basement. Dad said it was fine. You moved my entire room while I was gone." "It's just stuff," he replied with that maddening shrug again. "You're still in the house, relax." Maya's voice floated down the stairs before her face did. "There was no point waiting," she said, arms crossed over her bump, though it was still barely visible. "You weren't using the room while you were out walking. Greg has a bad back, he can't be sleeping on the futon forever." I was too stunned to speak. All I could do was look around. The low ceiling, the spiderwebs in the corner, the smell of damp concrete. "I didn't agree to this," I managed finally. "We tried to make it cozy," Maya said, gesturing vaguely to a frayed throw blanket tossed over the arm of an old armchair. "And hey, you've got more privacy now." Greg chuckled, my hands were shaking. "I want my room back," I said. Greg shook his head. "It's not your room anymore, Jules." And then Maya said it. "You know," she said slowly, like a suggestion wrapped in sugar, "it might be better if you just left the house altogether." I looked up at her. Her smile was pleasant, her eyes were not. A silence fell between us like dust, and for the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even flinch, because something stirred in me, a memory, a quiet, simple truth, the deed. The house wasn't theirs, it never had been, it was mine. Dad signed it over to me 2 years ago during his recovery when no one else stepped up to cover the mortgage payments. I'd been the one to keep the bills paid, to navigate the refinancing, to put in the hours and the money when no one else could. They didn't know, and suddenly that ignorance felt like power. I nodded slowly, scanning the basement again. "All right." Greg raised an eyebrow. "All right, sure," I said. "I'll stay down here." Maya blinked. "Really? Really," I said, walking over to the boxes, starting to stack them neatly like I cared. "This'll be just fine." Because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't defeat, this was leverage. Let them get comfortable. Let them decorate the nursery. Let them believe they'd won, for now. The basement smelled like old rain and dust, like forgotten things. I sat cross-legged on an old patchwork quilt, Marley curled up tightly beside me, his soft fur the only comfort in the concrete chill. Upstairs, laughter spilled through the floorboards. Maya's laugh, high, syrupy, too loud. Greg's deep chuckle following hers. Clinks of silverware, dishes, glasses. Sound of a family enjoying dinner. Without me. I hadn't been invited, not explicitly, not even casually. No one called down the stairs to say, "Hey, Julia, we're eating, come join us." And I didn't go up, I couldn't, not after what they'd done. Instead, I sat in the corner of what used to be our dad's workshop, now a cluttered storage maze with my life stacked in cardboard towers. A cold pipe dripped behind me. A silverfish darted across the floor near the washer. But Marley was warm. And I was quiet. That apparently made me easier to live with. The light above me flickered once, twice, then held steady. It was almost poetic. I was scratching Marley under his chin when the basement door creaked open. Heavy footsteps followed, slow and deliberate. My father's shape emerged in the dim light, carrying a dinner plate wrapped in foil like a peace offering he didn't believe in. "Figured you hadn't eaten," he said, setting it on top of one of the boxes. "Your mom made pot roast." I didn't answer, just looked at the plate. No steam, no smell, cold. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and sighed like this was all a bit inconvenient. "Look," he muttered, glancing toward the ceiling as another burst of laughter floated down. "They didn't mean to hurt your feelings." I stared at him. "They moved me out of my room while I was gone." He shrugged, as if facts didn't matter much anymore. "It's not permanent. Maya's pregnant. These things shift." "Shift?" I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. "You mean I shift, I move, I disappear, so they can stay comfortable?" His jaw tightened. "Why do you always have to be difficult?" I stood, slowly, my voice low. "You mean why can't I just let them take what's mine without protest? It's just a room, Julia, you're still in the house, they need it more than you do right now." "And what about my needs?" I asked, more curious than angry now. "Do those matter at all?" He looked at me like I was speaking a language he didn't know how to translate. "I've done everything you asked," I said, the words coming steadier now. "I stayed when Greg left, I helped you when you got sick, I kept the mortgage going when we couldn't afford groceries, I gave up job interviews to keep this house afloat." "Don't throw that in our faces," he said quickly. "I'm not," I replied, voice cool. "I'm just saying I earned my space. And it's telling that the second Maya needed it, you all forgot what I gave up to keep this roof over your heads." His silence said everything. He looked at the plate, still untouched. "Just give them time." The words, meant to sound comforting, felt more like a command. Just give them time. Give, that's all I ever did. He turned to go, his hand lingering on the stair rail like he wanted to say something more. But he didn't, he just left. Marley meowed softly as the door clicked shut behind him and the lock snapped. Not locked this time, just closed, but the echo carried the same message. "Stay down." I looked at the plate again, beef graying under cold mashed potatoes, and pushed it aside. I wasn't hungry, I was angry, but not the fiery kind. No yelling, no breaking things. This was the quiet kind, the kind that simmers, the kind that builds, the kind that starts plans, because now I knew exactly where I stood in this house. And very soon, they would too. The next morning, the basement felt colder than usual. I rolled over, Marley still curled against my legs, and squinted up at the narrow sliver of light slipping under the door at the top of the stairs. The usual hum of the dishwasher and chatter from the TV were missing. Just muffled footsteps above, faint voices I couldn't quite make out. I fed Marley, made my bed with what little space I had, and climbed the steps, ready to face another round of thin smiles and thick tension. But when I reached the top, something felt off. I twisted the knob. It didn't budge. I frowned, tried again, turned harder, click, not from me turning it, from the other side. My heart skipped. I knocked gently at first, thinking maybe it had jammed. "Hello," I called. "Can someone open the door?" Nothing. I knocked again, louder. "Greg, Maya," still nothing. Just footsteps overhead and then laughter. Laughter like nothing was wrong. I banged the door with my open palm, harder this time. "Mom, Dad, it's locked," still nothing. Panic flared, but I shoved it down. Maybe it was a mistake, a stupid mistake. A heavy box had shifted, a draft, anything, but the minutes turned to an hour, then 2, then 4. I sat at the bottom of the stairs in disbelief, Marley nestled beside me, sensing something wasn't right. No texts, no apologies. No footsteps descending to check if I was okay, just silence. And the soft click of the thermostat turning on upstairs. That meant they knew. That meant they were up there. That meant this wasn't an accident. I stared at the wall, every emotion from the past week tightening around my throat like a noose. This house was mine. And they had locked me in the basement. Finally, around dusk, I heard the bolt slide free. The door opened with an almost cheerful creak. Maya stood there holding a tray, tea, crackers, something that smelled like lemon. her face warm and composed as if we were just girls at a sleepover. "Oh good, you're awake," she said, stepping down like this was normal. I didn't move. "We figured you needed rest," she continued sweetly. "After everything yesterday, Greg thought it would be best if you had some uninterrupted time to decompress." I stood. Marley darted up the steps ahead of me. "You locked me down here," I said, not raising my voice, but each word sharp as glass. Maya blinked innocently. "Well, not locked, we just didn't want you to feel pressured to come up if you weren't ready." "I called out," I said. "I banged on the door for hours. You were probably just asleep. We didn't want to wake you." She actually smiled. As if this entire charade was a wellness retreat she'd arranged for my benefit. I stepped past her. She didn't move. "Julia," she said, that sing-song voice still clinging to its faux kindness. "You've been under so much stress lately. Maybe take some time to think about what's best for everyone. The baby, Greg, the family." I turned. Finally looked her dead in the eye. "I have," I said. "And believe me, this basement was the perfect place for it." Her face faltered just slightly. But it was enough. I walked down the hall without another word. My feet barely made a sound against the hardwood, but inside me something screamed. They didn't just move me out of my room. They didn't just ruin my things. They didn't just lock a door. They crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They made a choice. And I was about to make mine. By the next morning, I'd made up my mind. Not the full plan, no, that would come later, but something inside me had finally clicked into place, like a gear turning after months of being jammed. They had locked me in a basement and called it kindness. I wasn't going to beg for sunlight anymore. I spent the early part of the day sorting through boxes, folding my clothes with calm, precise movements. The action kept me grounded, something to focus on while Marley pawed at loose socks like he was trying to help. The silence upstairs told me everything I needed to know. They were giving me space now, not out of guilt, out of strategy. They thought I was preparing to leave. And maybe I was, in a way. I opened the document box I'd tucked behind the old shelving unit, things I'd always kept close but out of sight. Bank records, insurance, a folder labeled house title legal. I ran my fingers over the thick manila edges, feeling the weight of ownership settle in my chest like a second heartbeat. A sudden noise upstairs made me pause, footsteps crossing the hallway, then voices drifting down through the old heating vent near the ceiling. The one no one remembered carried sound both ways. Stilled, slowly stepping underneath it. "Okay, but seriously," Maya was saying, voice low but clear. "What's the timeline? She's obviously packing." Greg scoffed. "Let her, she's not going to fight us over this. She hasn't stood up for herself since we got here." A beat of silence, then a clink, maybe a mug being set on the counter. "I still think we should just ask your parents to transfer the deed," Maya said casually. "They believe it's theirs anyway, don't they?" My chest tightened. Greg hesitated. "Yeah, they still think the house is in Dad's name. He never talks about the refinance." "We can fix that," Maya said. "Once she's gone, we'll clean up the papers. Your mom's got a copy of the old documents. I'll talk to her." "Fix that," my breath caught. I stood there frozen beneath the vent, my hands gripping the folded flannel shirt in my lap like it was the only thing keeping me from flying apart. So that was the plan. Not just to push me out of my room. Not just to make me invisible. They wanted the whole house. They believed they could lie, manipulate, fix the truth, and walk away with the only thing I had left. And the worst part? They were doing it with silk voices and family dinners and baby talk, like thieves in cashmere. I moved slowly, deliberately, back to the box I'd been sorting. Marley followed me, tail twitching like he sensed something different in the air. I reached down and pulled out the deed. My name, black ink, clear title. Date-stamped, notarized, signed by my father when he was still recovering and grateful and remembered all I'd done. It was mine. Every wall, every window, every lock on every door. I stared at the paper for a long moment, then I smiled. Not the kind of smile they knew, not the polite one I'd been taught to wear. This one was colder, sharper, the kind of smile that doesn't need to raise its voice to make a point. Let them keep planning. Let them think I was folding, fading. Let them whisper. Because now I wasn't just taking my life back. I was going to show them what it looked like when someone they underestimated owned the ground they were standing on. 2 days later, I met with a realtor at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with warm lighting, mismatched mugs, and enough background noise to muffle uncomfortable truths. I chose a table near the window, Marley's carrier tucked beneath the chair beside me. He wasn't coming with me inside the cafe, of course, but it was habit now to keep him close when I could. He made me feel like something in my world still loved me without conditions. I wore a navy sweater, jeans that weren't stained with basement dust, and a calm face I didn't quite feel. I'd reached out to the realtor, Monica Bell, through a colleague's referral. Professional, discreet, and more importantly, completely disconnected from my family. She arrived 5 minutes early, blazer crisp, expression open but focused. "You must be Julia," she said, extending a hand with an easy smile. "That's me," I replied, shaking hers firmly. "Thanks for making time so quickly." "Of course," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I reviewed the documents you sent over. Everything seems straightforward." My chest loosened just slightly. For the first time in weeks, someone was speaking to me like I was in control. I wasn't a guest, a burden, or a background character in someone else's domestic fantasy. "I'm planning to rent a small place downtown," I explained, stirring my coffee, "and I want to prepare the house for sale. The situation with my family is complicated." Monica gave a professional nod, no judgment. "That's not uncommon. Transitions like these can get messy, but from what I saw, you've got clean title on the property." A pause. "However," she added gently, flipping through the folder she'd brought, "there's something I need to flag for you." I sat straighter. "Okay. There's a lien," she said carefully. "Placed on the property last year. It's minor, should be relatively easy to clear with some paperwork and payment." My fingers tightened around my mug. "A lien," she nodded. "It's from a personal loan taken out against the home. Small, but it does mean the house can't be sold until it's resolved." I blinked. "Who took it out?" She glanced back at her notes. "It lists Robert and Elaine Elridge, your parents." My stomach twisted. They had borrowed against my house. My house. They signed the deed over to me. Knew it was mine. But sometime after that, they had gone behind my back, used their names, maybe even forged the paperwork, or perhaps the bank never caught the ownership change. Either way, it was a betrayal dressed up in trust. I forced a small smile, nodding like this was just another bump in the road. "Right, that makes sense." But it didn't, not one bit. Monica watched me for a moment, then said gently, "It's not uncommon, especially with family properties. Sometimes paperwork gets sloppy when titles change hands. This doesn't mean the sale is off the table. It just means we'll need to file a release and possibly negotiate with the lender. I can walk you through it." "Thank you," I said. "I want to move forward, even if I have to eat the cost." She nodded. "You've got time and rights." We talked numbers, next steps, timelines. I took notes, asked questions, nodded at all the right places. But inside, my thoughts were miles away, spiraling around that one word. Lien. I couldn't even blame Greg or Maya for this one. This came from the people who raised me. The ones who called me selfish for needing boundaries. The ones who smiled at me across dinner tables while secretly cashing in on my name. When the meeting ended, Monica stood, offering another firm, reassuring handshake. "I'll be in touch within a few days once I speak with the title office." "Great," I said, my voice clear despite the storm inside me. "Looking forward to it." She left, and I sat alone at the table for several minutes, staring at my half-empty mug. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It just settled, heavy and quiet in the chest. But this time I didn't cry, because I was done being shocked, done being stunned into silence. This was just more proof that I was never going to be protected. Not even by the people who should have drawn the line long before I had to. So I would draw my own. Even if it cost me more than I expected. Even if it meant tearing the illusion of family down to the studs. The apartment was small, beige, and echoey in the way new spaces always are before life fills them in. Boxes sat like silent monuments around the room, half opened, spilling towels, cables, notebooks, and mismatched cups I didn't even remember packing. I'd only signed the lease 2 days ago. Monica had helped fast-track it, sensing, I think, that I needed anything that was truly mine. So here I was. A third-floor walk-up with a broken screen on the window, a humming fridge, and Marley stretched out like a prince on a folded comforter near the radiator. It should have felt like a beginning. But instead, I sank to the floor in the middle of the room, the carpet scratchy beneath my knees, and cried in a way I hadn't let myself in weeks. Not the neat, screen-ready kind of tears. The ugly, raw kind that come from somewhere deeper. Because the betrayal was bigger than just a ruined laptop, or lost privacy, or a basement door that wouldn't open. It was them. My parents. The ones who were supposed to teach me how to be safe in the world, had quietly signed away pieces of my future while smiling over pot roast. They were supposed to protect me, I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. Marley meowed softly from across the room, then padded over, nuzzling into the crook of my arm. I clutched him, burying my face in his fur, and for a few seconds I let myself fall completely apart. I didn't want to be strong, didn't want to be calculating or clever or brave. I just wanted someone to be sorry. And they weren't. They never had been. Every line they crossed, everything they took from my room to my trust had been dressed in the disguise of what's best for the family. As if I wasn't part of it. As if I was just extra. The girl who stayed home too long. Who didn't move out fast enough. Who owed them everything and had the nerve to want something for herself. I sat there on that scratchy beige carpet, holding my cat and remembering every small silence I'd swallowed to keep peace. Every time I'd smiled through being dismissed. And something inside me shifted. Not with a bang, not with fury, but with precision. My tears dried slowly, my breathing evened. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my hoodie and stared at the nearest box, labeled Important Docs. Inside was the deed, the real one. With my name. The lien my parents put on the house wasn't the end of anything. It was just the final clue in a pattern that had been playing out for years. They would take and take until I stopped them. And now I would. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but because if I didn't draw the line, no one ever would. And I needed them to see that I had won. Marley purred louder as I stood, rubbing his cheek against my ankle. I looked around the apartment again, bare, quiet, a little lonely. But it was mine. Every inch of it. And that was where the healing would start. Not in a house full of people who thought I owed them my silence, but in a space where my voice wouldn't have to fight just to be heard. 3 days later, I came back. Not with a suitcase, not with an apology, but with a moving truck, a clipboard, and a team of uniformed men waiting for instructions. I stood on the curb in front of the house I grew up in, trench coat cinched at the waist, sunglasses hiding the exhaustion in my eyes. Marley sat safely in his carrier in the front seat of my car, the engine still warm. It was early, barely 8:00 a.m., and the neighborhood was quiet save for the rumble of the truck's engine and the low murmur of one mover asking, "Are we taking everything?" I looked up at the house. The porch where I used to read. The window with the bedroom they took from me. The kitchen I was banished from like a guest in my own story. "Yes," I said, handing him the list. "Everything on here. Don't leave a chair." He nodded and turned to his team. As they started toward the door, the front curtain twitched. Seconds later, Maya came flying out in her robe, hair wild, one hand clinging to her phone and the other trying to tie the sash at her waist. "Wait, what the hell is going on?" she shouted. She looked from the movers to me like she couldn't quite compute the picture. I took off my sunglasses and met her gaze, dead calm. "Good morning," I said, voice even. "I recommend staying out of their way." Her eyes darted to the truck, then to the clipboard in my hand. "Julia, what is this?" I didn't answer. The front door opened again and Greg stepped out barefoot, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's happening?" Maya turned to him, pointing like I was some criminal caught red-handed. "She's taking stuff, furniture, everything." Greg looked at me, a crease forming between his brows. "Is this a joke?" "Not even a little," I replied. "Your joke stopped being funny when you locked me in the basement." One of the movers passed us with the living room rug rolled over his shoulder. Greg stepped forward. "You can't just come in and, this was never your house to begin with," I said. My voice didn't rise, it didn't need to, it cut clean. "You don't get to squat in my home, steal my room, touch my things, and then act surprised when I take it all back." Maya laughed, a short, breathless sound. "You're insane, you moved out, you left." "No," I said, looking directly at her. "You pushed me out." "There's a difference." Greg crossed his arms. "This is our parents' house, you can't just waltz in with a truck and act like you're the sheriff." I pulled a paper from my coat pocket, folded it cleanly, then handed it to him without flinching. He stared at the deed in his hands like it might bite him. "My name, my signature, no one else's," I said. "Dated 2 years ago, long before you showed up playing house." More movers came out, carrying the dining room chairs, the kitchen clock, even the vase Maya insisted was her aesthetic. "Stop them," she hissed to Greg. "Do something." But Greg said nothing, he was still staring at the paper. His silence was the loudest sound on the street. Maya turned back to me, eyes wild. "You're not doing this, I'm pregnant." "I didn't take your child," I replied. "I took my furniture." "And where are we supposed to go?" she snapped. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. You figured out how to take my room, my space, my peace. I'm sure you'll figure out a place to sleep. She looked like she might lunge at me, but Greg's hand landed on her arm, gentle but firm. Let it go, he muttered. What? She barked. She's got the paperwork, he said. We can't stop her. That moment, that exact moment, was the first time I saw fear flicker in Maya's eyes. Real, quiet fear, because the game was over. Because the girl they pushed into the basement had just pulled the floor out from under them. The final piece of furniture, the cherrywood sideboard from the dining room, was being wheeled down the steps when my parents arrived. I heard the familiar crunch of Dad's tires on the gravel before I saw them. He parked crookedly, barely shutting off the engine before stepping out, Mom right behind him. Their eyes took it all in, the truck, the movers, the empty porch, Maya sobbing into her hands, and then me, standing calmly in the center of it all. Julia, Dad barked, slamming the door shut. What the hell is going on here? Mom's voice cracked as she stepped forward, glancing from me to Maya and back again. Why are they taking everything out of the house? I reached into my bag, pulled out the printed deed, clean, notarized, undeniable, and walked straight toward Greg, who still hadn't moved from the edge of the lawn. Here, I said, placing it flat against his chest. Since you keep forgetting whose name is on the title. He caught it with fumbling fingers, scanned the top line, and froze. Julia Elridge, he read aloud, the disbelief almost childlike. No Robert, no Elaine, no Greg, no Maya, I said, just me. Maya's breathing hitched. That's not true, she whispered from the porch, still clinging to her robe like it might hold her together. It's not, tell me it's not true. It's true, I said, voice flat. The house was signed over to me 2 years ago when no one else in this family could manage a single mortgage payment. I kept it afloat. I paid the taxes. I covered the repairs. I made sure we didn't lose it. Greg looked to our parents. You, he stammered, you never told me. You let us believe. We thought it was still in your father's name, Mom said quickly, eyes darting nervously. We didn't know she'd filed something without us. Filed something? I laughed, bitter and hollow. You signed it, both of you, you sat at the table, I brought you the pen. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. I let you live here, I continued, stepping up onto the porch. I didn't ask for rent. I didn't ask for back pay. I gave you peace, even when you let them take everything from me. You let them move me to the basement like I was a burden. Mom's lip trembled, but she didn't speak. Greg was still holding the deed like it might suddenly rewrite itself. Maya collapsed. Right there on the porch step, knees buckling beneath her. She clutched her stomach, not in pain, but in disbelief, as if the walls of the house themselves had betrayed her. You planned to steal what you never owned, I said coldly. You whispered your little schemes through the vents. You thought I'd disappear quietly. You were wrong. Julia, Dad tried again, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a smaller envelope, one I'd spent all weekend preparing. These, I said, tossing the keys into my father's hand, are to a small bungalow 2 blocks from here. It's already paid through the next 12 months. There's a little garden out back, enough space for the 2 of you. Mom caught her breath. She began, confused. You're not being evicted, I said. You're being freed from pretending I owe you the very roof over your head. I'm your mother, she said, the words trembling. And I'm your daughter, I replied. But you let them treat me like a stranger. You stood by while they took, and you said nothing. Silence. Then Greg spoke, voice dull and shaky. So what now? You just kick us out, humiliate us. You humiliated yourselves, I said. I'm just collecting what's mine. Maya tried to stand, tears streaking down her face. Please, she whispered, the baby. This has nothing to do with the baby, I interrupted. It has to do with choices and consequences. The movers emerged from the house, now noticeably quieter, empty almost. One of them gave me a nod. It's done, he said. Truck's ready to roll. I turned back to the 4 people on the porch, my brother, his weeping wife, my stunned parents. No one spoke. No one had anything left to say. And maybe that was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. I walked down the steps, past the truck, toward my car. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I simply drove away past the street where I used to ride bikes, past the park where Dad once taught me to catch a ball, past the house that they thought would always be theirs. But it never was. It was mine. And now they finally knew it. It's been 3 weeks since I left Charlotte behind. I didn't go far, just a 2-hour drive west to Asheville. But somehow this place feels like another universe entirely. The air is lighter here, cooler, pine-scented. The kind of air that doesn't sit on your chest like a secret you can't confess. The apartment isn't big, but it's mine. Truly, fully mine. The living room smells like fresh paint, soft clay with hints of orange and terracotta, warmer than the sterile white walls that came standard. I'd spent 2 days on a ladder, Marley watching every stroke from the couch like a tiny foreman. There are 3 plants on the windowsill now. A pothos, a snake plant, and a stubborn little fiddle leaf fig I've named Agnes. I talk to them when I water them, and maybe that's strange, but so is starting your life over at 30 with a cat and a deed in your glove box. I'm okay with strange. There's a bookshelf half-assembled against the far wall, screws lined up neatly in rows like I'm daring the universe to challenge my precision. My tea steeps in a handmade mug I picked up at a local artist co-op. Cinnamon rooibos. Comfort in liquid form. I sit by the window and read, one socked foot tucked under my leg, the other keeping Marley from climbing directly into the mug. He still tries. Every time. My phone buzzes from across the room. Again, I don't move. I already know what it is, Greg, probably, or Mom. The screen's been lighting up for days now. I don't check the messages anymore. I don't need to hear their half-apologies, their attempts to rewrite the truth now that the power's shifted. They never asked me how I was. They just wanted access, position, control. Now that it's gone, they're trying to remember how to sound like family again. But silence is its own answer. I reach across the coffee table, press the side button, and turn the phone face down. It goes quiet. Outside the window, wind dances through the branches. A child laughs in the distance. A dog barks. The world keeps moving. And for the first time in what feels like years, I let it move without me. No one's watching my every step. No one's using the word selfish like a leash. No one's telling me where I do or don't belong. Here I belong. In this quiet little apartment with chipped molding and imperfect tile, with Marley sleeping on a stack of clean laundry and Agnes losing one leaf, a week despite my best efforts. Peace doesn't look like victory dances or revenge montages. Sometimes, it just looks like tea and paint-stained sweatshirts and a quiet room where no one raises their voice. And in that quiet, I can finally hear myself. Not the version shaped by guilt or obligation. The real me. The one who learned that leaving isn't failure, it's choosing yourself when no one else will. 1 year later, on an ordinary Thursday, I passed a bookstore window and stopped in my tracks. There it was, propped up between a memoir on grief and a hardcover about decluttering your life. Home is Boundaries, Reclaiming Your Space and Self by Julia Elridge. My name, on the spine, on the cover. In the window. I blinked, not out of disbelief, but because the moment was softer than I expected. Not a flood of emotion. Just a steady warmth, like stepping into a patch of sunlight you didn't realize you'd been missing. People passed by on the sidewalk. None of them looked twice at me, and I liked it that way. They didn't know this woman with the reusable tote bag and cat hair on her sleeve had once been locked in her own basement by people who swore they loved her. They didn't know the kind of silence I'd endured, or the names I'd been called behind doors that should have stayed open. Or how many nights I cried into Marley's fur, wondering if I was wrong for wanting more than survival. But I did more than want it, I claimed it. The book wasn't revenge, it wasn't a tell-all, it was a beginning. A guide for women like me, women made small in houses they helped build. Women called selfish for drawing lines. Women taught to give, give, give until there was nothing left to stand on. In the opening chapter I wrote, "This story doesn't end with a slammed door or a perfect apology. It ends with a room of your own, a door that locks from the inside, and a voice that doesn't shake when you say, enough." I didn't write it to make them feel guilty. I wrote it so I'd never forget who I had to become to survive them. Behind me, someone stepped closer to the window, leaned in to read the title. A woman in her late 40s, maybe, clutching a cup of coffee and a too-heavy bag. She nodded once to herself. I turned and walked away, heart steady. There were still voicemails I hadn't listened to. Emails marked unread. Holidays passed without forced hugs, and yet none of that felt like absence anymore. It felt like space, like I'd built something no one could take this time. Not a house, but a home, inside myself.